Hey everyone, welcome back. In this video, I'm going to walk you through the creation of a trading application using the Interactive Brokers TWS API. So the TWS API is also known as the Trader Workstation API. And this is the official API supported by Interactive Brokers, not a wrapper or a third-party library. They document it and it's open source on the website. And what it lets you do is write computer programs that interact with Trader Workstation. So you can interactively program your brokerage account with Interactive Brokers. And so you can do this in a variety of programming languages, including Python, Java, C++, C#, and Visual Basic. On this channel, I typically discuss Python, even though I know Java and C++ and am proficient in a variety of languages. I find that Python's very flexible and it's most importantly, very easy to teach and for people to pick up. And there's a lot of beginner programmers that watch this channel, so I want to use what is easiest. If there's high demand for another language like Java or C++, let me know, and I can probably make that happen. So what are we going to build? So there's all these concepts involved, like creating a client, checking your account, callback functions, building order objects, contract objects, creating a client, connecting, socket programming, many different concepts that we're going to discuss in this tutorial that I have outlined on the website at hackingthemarkets.com, and you can follow along. I have all of the source code on here, right? And you can see there's many pages. I took a long time writing this, and so yeah, so that's all available for free on the website. However, I do have a link to Interactive Brokers if you decide to follow along and want to sign up. It does support the channel. So what are we building? Let's go ahead and run this. So I don't want to take too long to start the coding bit, but what I like to do is show you the end result, like what we're trying to build, and then I'm going to go back and delete everything, start from scratch, uninstall everything, and show you how to build it up from scratch and provide you all the code. So I'm going to run this final project. You can see I'm running a Python program here. You see it's fetching some data, and it's going to launch a little application here. So what we are building is this desktop application here. So I've made a lot of web applications on this channel, but this is a desktop one. So you can see I can expand it out. You see a TradingView lightweight chart right here, and that's provided by this library called TradingView Lightweight Charts in Python. So there's no JavaScript or HTML involved in this app. This guy, Lewis NW, did a great job creating an open source library. I've created a video on this before. However, this one, he's made a lot of updates since then because I made that video in July of last year. Since then, you can see there's been many releases of this, so it's a lot more powerful. So I want to go over some of the new functionalities so that I can update that video, but also provide an update to my Interactive Brokers tutorial to use the official API. What are the features of this? What are we building? So I have it outlined here. So if you look here, the features we're building are, so I'm going to walk you through how to use all the different functionality in the API. And in using that API, I don't want it to just be like, oh, here's code. I want to make it actually produce something that's visual and something that you can actually use. I find that to be a little bit more motivating as a project rather than just talking about the concepts. So to build up something like this, let me talk about the different features, and then we'll get into coding this. So number one, you'll notice there's data on here. So where does this data come from? So what I'm going to do is first, we're going to walk through how to connect to Trader Workstation. So we need to create a client. So the first step is going to be to create a client. So I'm just giving an overview of what we're building. So the part one, we're going to build a client. So it's a Python client. It's going to start a new thread and connect. It's going to make a socket connection to a specific port. And so we're going to do network programming in this tutorial rather than like a REST API like we've done with Alpaca and other services. Now, there's some complexity here, so I'm going to try to talk about some of the various differences involved. So we're going to connect to our local Trader Workstation on a specific port. And then once we're connected, we'll be able to send commands to Interactive Brokers and get responses back. So step one, creating a client. Step two, we need some data. So once we can connect, we have this persistent connection to Interactive Brokers. So we can send a request for historical data. You see I'm sending a request for a contract. So a contract is just a tradable instrument. And so I'm doing this for stock right now. So this is going to be for TSMC, so the Taiwan Semiconductor. We're going to get some 5-minute data, and then once we get that data back, Interactive Brokers is going to call me back, and I'll be able to render that data on this chart. So we're going to talk about sending commands, and then implementing callbacks, and then handling the response. And so what's kind of cool about a network program like this versus a REST API, let's say we want to place a limit order. If I did this with a REST API and sent like a web request, that doesn't really maintain any state. It's stateless. So I send a request out there saying, oh, buy this stock at 150 or whatever. How do I know when that's filled, right? Once I send the request, it's gone. I have to turn around and pull the server and say, tell me about this order ID. Is it done yet? Is it done yet? Is it done yet? And it may never even be finished, right? Whereas with Interactive Brokers here, I have a persistent connection over this socket, and I can, while that connection's open, I just send the command, and then it just notifies me back in real time when that order is filled. So I'm going to show you how to, I'm going to walk you through the process of sending commands and requests and processing the callbacks in the client. Next, like I said, we're going to be rendering a chart. So we'll create a chart object and display this chart and then a bunch of these new widgets on the screen. So what can we do? Well, first of all, we can change time frames. So this is called the switcher widget. So it's kind of like we're building a desktop application here, but the low-level details are handled by the lightweight charts library that Lewis has made. So what I can do is click 15 here, and what that'll do, you'll see how it's interacting with the Python program. So if I click 15, it's going to make another call for historical data. You see a pandas data frame down there. So I'm gonna click 1 hour. You'll see it makes another call, calls it back, and then we re-render that data. So I want to walk through how to send a command, get stuff back, process it, present it in a new way. So that's called the switcher right there. So the switcher widget. The next thing I'm going to show you how to do is I can do Command F, and I can switch to Microsoft, for instance. So we have these different shortcut keys, so I can switch between stocks, and then it shows me a legend, or a watermark, I mean, on the chart right here. The other thing we have is a screenshot ability and drawing tools. And so let's say I have Taiwan Semiconductor pulled up right here, and I am on a different time frame here. So I'm going to switch to 15 minutes. You'll notice there's a horizontal line on here. And so since we get this data back in a pandas data frame, we can perform calculations with pandas TA or just regular pandas functions. And I'm just going to get the highest high here. And I can programmatically draw a line here. So you can see I have a horizontal line. And not only that, he has provided a way to implement callback functions whenever certain events happen on this chart. And so I can drag this line around. So let's say I want to zoom out a little bit more here. And let's just say now I'm interested in this particular high. So I can drag this down. And if you look at my code at the bottom there, you'll see it says horizontal line moved. So there's a callback function whenever I move this line. And then what that means is I can track the state of this application and maybe track the state of the price and say, keep track of the price data. And when the price crosses above this line, wherever I've set it, I can say, place an order or take some other type of action, right? So that's horizontal lines and callbacks. The other thing is now we have these drawing tools available. And so I can draw a trend line, for instance, right here. And so if I click right here, I can draw this trend line, and I can move this down right here, for instance, right? There's also, you can just draw arbitrary horizontal lines here at will. And there's also these Raylines, which means you start at a point and it just projects out into the future. So that happens if you double click there. What we also have is the ability to take screenshots of the state of the chart. And so we implement a little button in the top bar. I click screenshot, and you're going to notice in my code, in this directory, you'll see it'll save another screenshot when I click it. There you go. And it captures that frame. And we have this drawing exactly like we configured it. And that's nice for some people that like to keep a record of their charts, or maybe you keep a little journal or publish these things somewhere. You can record all this information and how it looked at the time. The other feature we're going to implement is hotkeys. So there's now functionality that lets you specify hotkeys. Now, this isn't something I typically do, but a lot of people have emailed me saying, oh, I use hotkeys for orders, like they're day trader types that watch charts all day. So what I could do here, since I'm connected to my brokerage account, and I can implement hotkeys here. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to hit Shift and O right now. And you'll see it's logging that an order was submitted, and you see in the actual workstation, this is actually submitting buy orders. Now the market just closed, so these are not getting filled right now, but they would be if it was open. I can also hit Shift P here, and I can programmatically execute a sell order. So you see now each time I click that, I hit that key, it executes a sell order. Now how does this look in the code? Well, you'll see I have Shift plus O, and it actually creates an Interactive Brokers order object and programmatically submits buys and sells right here. The other thing we can do is on the right side, you see we have some symbols listed here on the right. And you'll notice we have this control of the layout. And so what I've done here is fired up a chart, and you'll see on my chart object there's a width, and you can have an inner width here. And so you can see this chart here. The chart side takes up 60% of the screen, and then I have this table widget on the right taking up 40% of the screen. And then what I'm doing is implementing an Interactive Brokers market scanner call. And so in the documentation, you can call different, you can configure different scanner subscriptions. And let's say I want to scan the market for top percentage gainers. So you want to see which stocks went up by the most on the current day. You can scan for all of those. You can also look at option activity, for instance, most active, right? And then so what we do is implement the scanner. And so when this fires up, it scans the market for these candidates. And then we're going to render all those rows in this table. And then I can click on any one of these, for instance, right? And get the data and have that be the focus. So if you're only interested in trading certain types of stocks that meet certain conditions, so I've seen some papers or strategies where someone, they only want to trade stocks that are over 1 billion market cap, over $5 a share, over $10 a share, with this much volume. You can implement these scanners and then have this list show up dynamically as soon as you fire up this application. Easily switch between, watch them, draw your lines, take screenshots, whatever you want to do, and programmatically submit orders. And then finally, what do I want to show? Yeah, so I showed the ability to programmatically have lines on the chart. And also you can see there's a little moving average right there as well. So we can perform any calculations on these pandas data frames and then render these on the chart. You can also see the volume data at the bottom there. All right, let's go ahead and get started here. So I'm going by the article here, and I've linked to many of the tools I'm using. First of all, you need Python, obviously. I'm kind of going with the assumption that you already know how to do some basic Python programming. Otherwise, this can be a very difficult tutorial for you. Secondly, I use Visual Studio Code as my IDE. So I would just download this for your operating system. Maybe you already use this, maybe you have something else, but I'm using VSCode for this, which is just a free code editor, which you can download and install. So I have that installed and it's running here. So what I did is just create an empty folder here on my desktop, and then I can open that right there. And then you see I have nothing in here. And so I can create a file called app.py, for instance, just to get something started. So my Visual Studio Code is set up to use my Python interpreter. And so if you installed Python, I also add a couple of VS Code extensions. And so here on the left is extensions, and you'll see I have a number of extensions installed. And so I install the Python extension, which gives you Python language support and some of the auto completion and debugging type of features. And I also install this PyLance plugin right here, so PyLance. And so what's nice, if you have those installed, you can easily get some hints and navigation in your code. So I'll bring up the finished application, and when I look at this, you'll see, if I'm importing a package that I'm unfamiliar with, like the Interactive Brokers contract object here, if I hold Command and click on this, you'll see I can dive into the Python source code for that and study the original source code, see what the function signatures look like, and get some details. likewise, if I'm hovering over like if I'm extending a class like EWrapper or EClient and I hover over this right here, historical data, you can see that I'm actually overriding a method in the parent class, and you can see it kind of shows me the different parameters it expects. Otherwise, who can memorize all of this stuff? It's a complicated library, and so these hints are very important. So that's why I recommend installing these extensions, even though technically, it's optional. The next thing we need is the TWS API itself. So this is the official API library that we're going to be using. And so when I click that, you'll notice it brings me to a little license agreement here. And I just say, I agree. And you download the appropriate version for your operating system. And so if you download it for I'm using Mac OS X, so I download this one over here. But for Windows, it looks like they actually have an installer. And so, yeah, you'll need to install that for Windows. I'm more familiar with the Mac setup process. And so I'm going to click this right here, and you'll see it actually downloads a zip file right there. And so I'm going to show this in my Finder, and I'm going to copy. So behind the scenes, I'm copying this over to my folder where my project is. And so let's go to my empty folder that we're working on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going back to my folder here where I have my trading application. And I'm going to go inside of my Finder and just paste that zip file. So I'm just going to work with it in the same directory and then just import it from there. So I'm pasting it. I have Finder in another window. So you see I paste that in there. And so now that zip file is right there. So if I go to my terminal here and list that directory, you'll see I have that TWS API zip. And I can just type unzip and unzip that, right? And you'll see this unzips that folder, and you'll see the directory IBJTS right there. And so that's the Interactive Brokers API right there, all those libraries, okay? Next, we need to also install the Trader Workstation, which is right here. You can Google it, or you can click the link from there. I'm not using the IBKR desktop, so they have a nice new user interface for this, but it doesn't yet support API functionality. So we can't use this yet, but it is a nice client. I'm using the Trader Workstation here, not the desktop. And so you can download this for your operating system and install it. So there's the TWS software. So you can download the TWS latest for your operating system and install it. And I am going to do that now. And I have the Apple Silicon, so I'm on an M2 processor here on a MacBook Pro, and I'm going to install it. And so I'm installing Trader Workstation like so. So I'm trying to do this step by step. So you see it's going to walk me through it. And I have two monitors here, so I keep having to drag this over. So I'm installing that right there. And so I'm going to run the Trader Workstation. So you'll notice when this comes up, we have a couple different modes here. So paper trading mode and live trading mode. And this is assuming that you have an Interactive Brokers account. There's a link below if you want to sign up for one. So there's paper trading, which lets you run all this stuff and trade, practice with no risk to you. So I recommend doing that since it's a tutorial. And I don't want anyone to risk their hard-earned capital while they're learning this stuff. Should someday in the future that you decide, oh, I'm comfortable risking money, that's up to you. There's a live trading mode as well. So what we'll do is start in live paper trading mode, and then also I will execute a few on my own account in live trading mode, just to show how we can easily swap between different ports to change which mode we're using. So I'm going to log into mine. I'm not giving you my password and all of that, so I'm going to do that off the camera. So now I'm logged in here into my paper trading account, and the first thing I want to do is allow access to my paper trading account. So even though no money is at risk here, it's still secure by default, saying, oh, I don't want to let external programs connect to Trader Workstation. So what I can do is I'm going to go to my File menu, Global Configuration. I can go to API right here, and then Settings. And then I can say enable ActiveX and socket client. So we're building a client that's going to connect to Trader Workstation over a socket. You'll see the socket port here. So this is port 7497 that I'm using by default. And so the port I'm using for paper trading mode is 7497, and in live trading mode, we're going to use 7496. So we need to log into our live trading account to set the port on that side as well. There's also this create API message log file to add some logging for different API requests. So I hit OK, and then let's see if we can actually connect to it. So to do that, we have the Interactive Brokers API source code right here, and we have an empty app.py. So we don't really have a lot going on. So let's go ahead and change that. So I'm going to scroll down and set up my coding environment. So we already installed VSCode. We set up a project folder, and let's talk about this virtual environment here. So I'm using a Python 3. Everyone should be on Python 3 at this point. I used to talk about Python 2 versus 3, but Python 2 is like decade old at this point. So you should, I don't think anyone's on Python 2 anymore. So you should have a Python 3 command. So I have the Python 3 command. Some people have it where you just type Python. And so I'm in the terminal in VS Code. So I've opened a terminal. And so what I'm gonna do first is create a virtual environment, which is like an isolated environment for this project in particular, because I make many different types of projects on this channel and personally, and many of them have different versions of those packages, and I don't want those to conflict. So you create a little isolated environment for your projects. And so I'm gonna type Python 3-m venv, and that's gonna create a virtual environment in a directory called venv. So you'll see it pops up a little directory called venv, and my VS Code is smart enough to go, oh, you created a new environment. Do you want to select it for the workspace folder? And I'm gonna click yes. And so now it knows about this environment. I can activate a virtual environment by typing .venv bin activate. So if you look in here, you'll see a bin activate. And so if you see venv in front of here, it means when you're running this, you're using the Python version that's in the virtual environment. So this is like an isolated instance of Python. And so you see when it runs now, you'll see it's actually running Python from that directory. So venv bin. I could be running Python 3.11 in this directory, and then some other project I have can be running Python 3.9, for instance, and have a different set of packages. And so not all of my projects are going to use the Interactive Brokers API. So when I install this package, I don't want to necessarily install it globally. I don't want to install lightweight charts globally. I want to isolate my projects, right? So I have a virtual environment here, app.py. Yeah, so I ran app.py with my play button, and I verified it's using my virtual environment Python right there. I want to install some dependencies, and so I use the pip command for that. So I'm going to pip install lightweight charts. And so that is the charting package we mentioned. You see it's installing a whole bunch of stuff right there. I also need to install the Interactive Brokers API. So I downloaded it, but you'll notice I have this setup.py that I need to run. And so that's in my Interactive Brokers source code. So I download the source code for Interactive Brokers API. So I'm going to go into that directory, into the source directory, and I'm using the Python client. And here, if I list inside that directory, you see there's a setup.py. I type Python setup.py install, and you see it installs the Interactive Brokers API just like that. And then how do we know this works? Well, let's try importing some classes and packages. So I'm going to import a client and a wrapper from the Interactive Brokers package. So I'm going to copy this right here, and let's try to import it and see if it knows about it. So I run that, and you see there was no error. So it means it clearly knows about it. It looks like my Pylant says it isn't quite sure, but what I can do is hover over it, and I click this quick fix, and I'll say add that to the path, and now it seems to know about it. And so now if I hover over it, you see how it picks up the documentation here, and then it also picks up those classes. And so now I can actually probably navigate. So if I hit Command click on the client, you can see I can actually dive into the source code and like navigate into all these different packages. And so that's how I know that this is configured properly. Now, the next thing we want to do is let's look at this Interactive Brokers API source code a bit. So there's documentation. If you Google around, there's a couple different sources of documentation. There's the old documentation, which is here. You can click whatever language. So if I click Python and I want to learn about order objects, for instance, you can click here and learn a bit. So this is the old documentation. There's a newer one on ibkrcampus.com. And so I can look at it here. This one looks a little bit more modern and cleaned up a bit. But I find that sometimes I need to dive into the source code to see the exact details. So if I go in here and click command click on client or just browse in the source here, you'll see there's a directory for each client. So if I want to see the C++ client source code, for instance, I could click on that and actually, oh, here's what the C++ code looks like. But for the Python client, I can go in here. Let's find the client. And so look, here's the EClient here, and you can see all of the different options available here. So if I instantiate a new client, you can see all the different member variables, the different methods that are available, and so forth. So if I search for like the word connect, for instance, we're going to use the connect function. And if I don't know about the connect function, I can look directly in the source code of this and see, oh, the connect function expects a host name, a port number, and a client ID. My host name is my local host. Port number, we talked about that in our configuration. And the client ID, we pick that ourselves. And I'll talk about that in a moment. So just so you know, you can browse the source code for orders or any of these other libraries and classes that we're going to use and see how they all work. And sometimes looking at the documentation and the doc strings inside of there give you a little more detail on what exactly is going on, and I find that very helpful. So, like for instance, if you look at the order object, there's so many options here. It's like ridiculous. So you see if you want to know what the trailing stop parameters are, you can see those are in there. And it has a lot of power, but with that, not every single thing is perfectly documented. So that's that. And then the other thing, so that's the client code under source here, right? So there's the client code under source, but then there's also samples. And so there's actually some samples in that little bundle we downloaded. And so if you want to see C++ code samples or Python code samples, they're in here. And there's a lot of helpful information in here. We're going to write this code, but also it's helpful to look at contract samples, for instance. And, I don't trade every type of contract. If you want to trade European stocks, there's like BMW, and that's how you'd actually construct those objects. And then, if you're trading options and you want to know how do I create a put option at a strike price of 105 for this particular symbol, how to do that, bonds, mutual funds. There's so many different types of contracts that I will not go over on this channel, futures, and so forth. Some people are trading cocoa now and orange juice and stuff like that. Those things are going crazy right now. So, different option combinations, et cetera, et cetera. So lots of good examples in there. And also what's useful is the order samples. So there's many different order types. So it's not just your standard market and limit order. You can see market order, very simple right there, but you can also see that there's many different order types available. So if I do stop limit, for instance, market on close. So if I want to place an order right when the market opens or right when the market closes, those order types are all available. If I want to place a trailing stop order, I can specify that as well as a trailing percent, so on and so forth. So that's some code examples and the actual client code itself, and getting familiar with that source code could be very useful. All right, so enough about the Interactive Brokers sample code. Let's talk about the code that actually goes into creating this application that we're building. So the way it's going to work is we are going to build this program up. So what I did, So I wrote this program all the way at the beginning, but what I did is divide it up into chunks. That way, we could talk about a piece of it at a time, add another function, add another section of functionality, and so forth. And so each of these snippets you can paste, copy paste, and we'll talk about it. And then you can see what I've added at each step and what each piece does. Because if it's just one big wall of code, then it's just too much all at once. So what we want to do is start up with one concept at a time. So here, the first thing I have here is creating an Interactive Brokers client. So let's take this code right here and put it in our app.py. So we're already importing the appropriate libraries here, so we don't need those, that extra code. So we import EClient and EWrapper. So what is EClient and EWrapper? Well, EClient lets us send a request or message to Interactive Brokers, and then the server gives us a response, and that is sent back to us via EWrapper. Now, not the biggest fan of these names, but you'll get used to it. Next thing we do is import thread, because we're going to run this connection in its own thread, because we're going to also have this desktop GUI application that is running separately. The next thing we do is create a new Interactive Brokers client. So here I have it called the IB client class. I could have called it the PTL client, or whatever you want to call your client, or you could call it a trading app. I've seen people call it a variety of things, so you might call it app or something like that, right? So you define your class here, and so this is just, hopefully you're familiar somewhat with object-oriented programming, but here this is a class. So this is just a collection of functions and member variables. And a class can inherit from parent classes. And so what this does is extend two different classes. So it inherits from EClient, which is our client class, and then EWrapper, which is our wrapper class. So one of them has the function. So if I dive into EClient and I have like request historical data, this has all the different functions for sending messages to Interactive Brokers. So request historical data, place order, so forth. So we're sending command outward from our client outward to the server. Now, this is just sending information that way, but we need to receive information back from the server. And so what happens is Interactive Brokers EWrapper here implements these callback functions. And so if I dive into EWrapper here, you'll see this has a historical data function as well. And what that does is when I request historical data, for instance, when it's ready and comes back, it calls a function called historical data. There's also a function called error, for instance. And so if the server returns an error to us, it'll call a function called error with an error code, an error message, and so forth. So what we can do here is when we extend these classes, we can implement either methods that are in EWrapper. So we'll implement the callback functions that are part of EWrapper, but we can also call any functions or methods that are part of the client class. And so that includes the function called connect right here. And so what you'll see here is when I instantiate a new client, so down here, I create my own client object. I create an instance of my IB client here, and then I give it a few parameters. So the host name is, or the host is 127.0.0.1. That's just local host because this Interactive Brokers Trader Workstation instance is running on my laptop right now. But technically, I might have an Interactive Brokers gateway and have it deployed onto some cloud server, which I showed in some other videos. So connecting locally, and then here I'm using port 7497 because I'm in paper trading mode. And in my configuration in the workstation here under API settings, I have the socket port at 7497. And so what I'm saying is create this socket connection to my local host to Trader Workstation and communicate on port 7497. And then the other parameter is a client ID. So technically, you might want to have multiple clients that are identified by a unique ID. So here I just have one client and I can just put the number 1 here. But technically you could give it client number 7, for instance. But you can't have like multiple clients with the same ID. So when I instantiate this, when you instantiate any class, the constructor is the init method. So when you create a new client, it automatically calls this function. We initialize the client parent class right here. And then we call connect. So EClient has a function called connect, and this handles all the details of creating a connection to Interactive Brokers. So you don't need to worry about all this. This is in the IB API source code. There's connect, disconnect, so forth. Now, so connect is an example of a function that lives on EClient because we're sending a message to connect, but the response could be from the EWrapper. So the EWrapper sends us messages back by calling methods that it implements. So there's the error function. And so what we do, if we want to listen for any errors that occur, we can make a function called error ourselves, and then we can specify what happens when the wrapper class calls this error function. And so what I'm saying here is I want to print the message out. And so let me comment out this code for a second. And what I'm going to do is just print message, and I'm going to print code. Okay. And so we're going to see if everything's proper. When I run this, we should create a new instance of the client, which will establish a connection. It'll run in its own thread. And then we should get a callback with any messages that we receive when we connect. And so be sure your Trader Workstation is running and you're logged in, because that's how it's authenticated. And I click play, and you see I receive a number of messages back. And so it says, okay, okay, okay. So that all looks good. I'm printing a code, and I'm printing a message here. So market data connection, and it lists all that out because I'm just printing it out like that. So that's all good. And those messages, even though this is called the error function, all those messages about my connection are coming back. Now you'll notice, even though this is called the error function, this is just all the output coming back from the server. And so what I have here is for these different codes for connecting, I just print the message. So I'm going to say if the code is like 2104 and some of these, there's a list of all these codes on the Interactive Brokers documentation. And so I'm just printing the message as is. But there are some times where you want to, you get a genuine error and you want to print the message. And so you can say, oh, if it's one of these codes, just print the message from the server. Otherwise, you can handle specific messages and type error in front of them and format them in a particular way. So that's step one, making sure you can actually connect. And in the tutorial here, I talk a little bit more about the details of, what are the concepts we cover here? Creating a class, inheritance, so we inherit from EWrapper and EClient. Here, the constructor, objects, and so forth. And then the callback, which is this error function right here. So we get notified from Interactive Brokers when a command is processed, and then it calls a callback. And let me, I think this request historical data, when we add that, this will make more sense. So the next thing we want to do is, now that we can connect, let's send a command to Interactive Brokers. And so what are we going to add here? So you'll see right here, in order to get some data, we already have a client here and we're connected. So now what we're going to do is take this little bit of code here under the client, and let's put this down low. And I'm going to put it right here. And I am going to put it right here. And you'll notice I have time.sleep here. And so what I need to do is import time. So I have that. And so I need to import anything that we access. So I'm creating a new contract object. So I need to make sure I import a contract right there. So I'm going to add a contract right here. And let me see if this runs. So I run that. You see nothing is happening yet. So what we're doing is creating a new contract and requesting historical data, but where's it at? Okay. So what does a contract object look like? Well, I imported contract. I create a new instance of contract. So a contract needs some type of symbol, a security type. So in this case, this is of type stock, but if it was options, I believe it's OPT, futures, FUT, and so forth. So there's a type of instrument. An exchange, you can just use smart here and it will figure it out for you. But if you have a specific exchange for the instrument you're trading, you would fill that in. Currency, I'm using US dollars. And so what I'm doing is calling request historical data. If I hover over that, you'll see I can see all of the different details of this function signature and what you need to pass in. And so you need to pass it a contract object, a request ID, an end time, duration string, bar size, and so forth. So you can request on different time frames, et cetera, et cetera. And so I'm giving it a request ID. I'm passing it my contract object that I just instantiated. The next parameter is the end time. I'm just going to say up till the present, so I can just leave that blank. I'm going to get 30 days of data on the 5-minute time frame. And then you can see there's 5 more parameters here. So there's a whole lot of parameters to these. And so that's why I said it was helpful to jump into this, and you can see some details of what each of those parameters are. So you'll see like format date, use RTH, for instance. What is that? So let's look down here, or what to show. So you can show the trades, the bid and ask. Use RTH, return all data available during the request, or only regular trading hours. So RTH is regular trading hours. You might want to return pre-market data, for instance. The date format, you have those options as well. So we request historical data, but we need a way to know, to get informed when that data has been requested. So that's where we get into implementing these EWrapper methods. And so if I jump into EWrapper, you'll see there is a function called historical data, and there's one called historical data end. And so these functions, you can say what you want to happen when the data comes back. So this is called every single time a bar of data comes back. So we get a bar data object that has the date, open, high, low, close, and volume. And then at the end, after we received all of the bars, it has another callback function to say, oh, I've gotten all the data that you asked for, so the full 30 days. And so what we can do is add those functions to our client here. And when we add those, Interactive Brokers will call them, all right? And so if I add these two functions, an implementation of them, and put them right here inside of my class, what I'm saying is print the bar, each bar as it comes back, and then print a message when you've received all the data. So if I run that, you'll see, look at that, a bunch of bar data starts coming in. It prints them bar by bar, and then at the very end you see, so there's one call for each bar, and then at the very end it calls historical data end, saying end of data. So I got everything back. So that's how we get our raw data. Now, how do we start creating a chart to visualize that data? So we're going to add on and create a simple empty canvas for the chart to start. And then I'm also going to start creating some constants here. You notice previously I hard-coded some values here like Taiwan Semiconductor and this host name, but you might want to change from paper trading to live trading mode. So you'll want some constants here. So we'll gradually refactor this code as we go. And so what I'll do here, first of all, let's create a variable for the initial symbol and the default host and the default client ID. And let's just put these at the top before our class. Let's just create some default values there. And then, so that'll be our default symbol when we start, but then we'll let them change it afterwards. Okay. And so now when I connect here, instead of hard coding the local host, I can do default host, or you can just call it host. And then if the host changes, you can just change it in one place at the top. That's our port number. And then we also have a default client ID. Now the port is interesting because sometimes we want 7496 for live trading, and sometimes we want 7497. So what I'm going to do is create a little flag. So if I want to change from paper trading to live trading, then I can set live trading to true. So right now I have it false. And so what I'm going to say, is by default, I'm going to set my trading port to my paper trading port right here, 7497. But if live trading is true, then I'll set my trading port equal to the live trading port, which is 7496. And then down here, I can just set this to trading port and then switch back and forth by just changing that one flag. All right. The next thing we need is we need to import the actual chart library that we're going to use. And so we're using lightweight charts. And so I am going to import that right here. And then at the bottom here, we're going to actually create an instance of a chart. And so down here, we're going to create an instance of chart. And so here, I'm going to go down. And right after my connection, I'm going to say, oh, create me a new chart and make it 1000 pixels wide. I'm going to show a toolbox and make the width of the chart 60% of the screen, or of the 1000 pixels. So that's my chart object. And I'm going to have this chart show. The other thing you need to do, we need this if name equals main when we run this program. So I will add that, or we will get an error. So we're creating a client connection, we're creating a chart, and then we're going to show the chart. And so I'm going to do chart.show right at the end there. Okay, so I'll run this guy and let's see if we get a chart box to come up. So I connect, I request some data, and I show a chart. And now it's completely empty. And so what do we want to do with the chart? We want to take the data, the historical data that we retrieve, and render it on this chart. So to do that, we need to figure out how to do that in lightweight charts. So to refactor a little bit more, what we're going to do is take this. Since we're going to be switching around time frames and symbols, we don't want to just do a default contract object and request it here. We want to put this inside of a function. And so what I want to do is have a function called getBarData, and then have this code live inside of there. That way you can send a different symbol in a different time frame, and all of that logic will be encapsulated in this one function called getBarData, and we'll just call it whenever the application starts. So let's go ahead and do that now. So I'm going to take this code here. So I'll make a function called getBarData, and then this accepts a symbol and a time frame, just like that. And then what we do is take this contract and historical data here. And this getBarData function will be responsible for calling request historical data. What else did I add? I added a watermark. And so this chart library has the option for a watermark, and just like that. And also I need to actually call the getBarData function. So we define getBarData, which instantiates a new contract object for whatever symbol is passed to the function. So I'm going to swap out TSM, and I'm going to use whatever symbol comes in as an input. And I'm going to swap out this 5 minutes and have it use whatever time frame is passed in. And then down here, I'm going to go ahead and call getBarData with the initial symbol, which is TSM, and the initial time frame, which is 5 minutes. And so I could even have initial time frame right there if I wanted to, and define that up here. So initial time frame equals 5 minutes. Okay, and then I run this, and this should still work. Let's make sure that still works. You see I have my watermark now that says TSM. I have my drawing tools, but still no rendering yet. So what we did first is just make sure our chart package works. And how did I know how that works? Well, it has examples on their page. So we instantiated a new chart object. This on the GitHub page for that. I know how to show a chart. And it looks like I need to set a data frame of price data in this format in order to actually display chart data. So let's take the data that comes back from Interactive Brokers and convert that to a pandas data frame, and then do just like it says in the documentation, which is set the data equal to that data frame. And so if you look here, what I have, the first callback I have was historical data that just prints a bar, and then historical data end, which just prints when it's done. But what we want to do is collect all those bars into a data frame format. And so here, the next piece here I had to code was rendering that historical chart. And so what I do here, inside historical data, we expand that out, not only print it, let's go ahead and take that bar data. So you see all those bars. This is actually an object. So it has a date, which is a Unix timestamp. We have an open, high, low, and close of price. We got volume, and so forth. And so what I'm going to do is collect all of that data into a dictionary. And so each bar will have its own dictionary with date, open, high, low, close, and volume. And I'm going to format it this way, just like that. And then once it's done, I'm going to put it in a queue, which I'm going to talk about shortly. So I'm going to take this code here and go to my historical data function. And just like that, you'll see it highlights a couple problems. I don't have date time imported, so I'm going to import a date time. And you'll also notice I'm going to be using a queue. So here at the top, I also create a new queue here, okay? And so I'm going to do this at the top. Now, what is this queue that I'm creating? Well, we need the desktop user interface to be able to interact with Interactive Brokers. So when when this thread is running with Interactive Brokers, that connection running, what I need to do is somehow get that data back to my chart for rendering. And so what I do is when that data comes back, what I'm going to do is just drop it in this queue, and then I'm going to be have my chart look at that queue and say, is there any new data there? And if there is, collect it and into a data frame, and then set it on the chart. And so I'm going to import queue here. So you'll see here at the top, I just import the standard queue package here. So I'm going to import queue. And then here you see I actually put the data that comes back from historical data in the queue. And then what I want to do is after I've received all the data in historical data end, I want to just update the chart. So I want to update the rendering of the chart and say render all the data that's available in the queue. And so in historical data end, this is my callback for when I have all the data. I'm calling a function called update chart. Now in that chart, how do I define that? This is how I read information from that queue. And so what I did is create a function. So it's getting longer now. There's more details. This IB client, I want to make sure the only code in here is the code for receiving information, connecting to Interactive Brokers in this client, and also callbacks that are called by Interactive Brokers. Now, anything that's like specific to rendering on the chart, I'm putting outside of that class. So I just have an update chart function right here, just like that. And what I'm doing is saying, oh, historical data, I got it back, call update chart. There's new data available in the queue. So what I'm doing in this function is retrieving the price data from this queue. And so what I'm doing in a loop here is saying, check this queue, get all the information available in it, all the bar data, append it to a list until it's empty. And then once that's done, then I'm going to go ahead and create a pandas data frame out of those bars. And then if I have a non-empty data frame, I'm going to set the data on the chart equal to that data frame. You see I have a little underline here saying PD is not defined. That's pandas. And so I need to import pandas as PD. And I'm going to stop this. And let's make sure I have pandas installed. I usually have that installed. But if you don't, type pip install pandas. And now let me run that. And you'll see what happened there is not only did we print the bars, we also consume the queue, put all those bars into a pandas data frame in this format. So data open, high, low, close, volume, the format that expects from this chart. And then I just set the data on the chart equal to this pandas data frame. And there you go. We have a nice looking chart right here that's zoomable and panable. And we also, by default, get our drawing tools just like that. So Making some progress, making some progress. All right, so the next bit we have here is on symbol and time frame switching. So you'll see we started with an initial symbol of a Taiwan semiconductor here. And in our get bar data, we accept a symbol and a time frame. But in our current interface, we don't really provide a way to switch between symbols and switch between timeframes because we don't have the toolbar up here yet. So how do we add a toolbar with different buttons so that we can add functionality to our application here? So I'm going to close this. And so the next thing we're going to talk about is this switcher functionality. So if I go over to the lightweight charts library, you'll see there is a switcher here where you can add a text box here for the symbol, and you can add a switcher to switch between time frames. And so he has them labeled 1 minute, 5 minute, 30 minute here. The examples in his code are based on like a CSV file, and I think he has a Polygon IO example. And so it's reading from a static file typically. And so what I want to do is make these parameters match what Interactive Brokers API expects. And so you'll see in the code we have shared here, in the switcher, you see I have the time frame for 5 min, so there's a space and like an S at the end. So that's one difference. And so what I'm going to do here is add this little bit to the toolbar. So you'll see we're adding two things to the top bar here. We're going to add a text box with the symbol, and we're going to also add a switcher, which is the time frame switcher. And you'll also see that I'm going to have a callback function. So anytime you switch between these elements, it's going to call this function on time frame selection. And so if I go down here to my chart object, so I'm going to go down here to where I instantiate the chart, I'm going to add this bit. So this is my chart object. I'm going to add this text box with the initial symbol of TSM, and I'm going to add this switcher with a default, and I'm going to do the default equal to, you can do 5 minutes, or I added that initial time frame variable. I didn't put that on the blog post, but I put it here. And I have a function called on time frame selection that is expected. And so I haven't defined this function yet. So here you'll see I've defined the function. And what I do is just specify what I want to do when I change a time frame. So every time I click on one of these, it's going to call on time frame selection. And so let me define that function here. So I'll put this after my get bar data function. I'll put this. And what this does is get a reference to the chart. And so if I were to change time frames, I'm going to get bar data again. And so I'm going to call get bar data. And instead of passing the initial symbol, I'm going to get the value of the symbol that's currently set in my toolbar there. And then I'm also going to pass the value of the time frame that's in the switcher. So if I run this now, let's see what happens. Let's see if we get that. So you'll see it added TSM there because that's my initial symbol. So now when I click a different time frame, I click 15 minutes, you'll see it calls get bar data, gets that data, renders it. I call 1 hour. Gets new data, so that's an hourly time frame bar right there. So it calls get bar data right there. So the callback calls get bar data, and then that in turn builds the contract for whatever symbol is currently selected, requests more historical data, sends it right back, sets a new watermark, and you see this is nice and dynamic. Now, how do I switch symbols? You see this doesn't do anything yet, so I need to add the search bar functionality. And so here we'll also have another callback function. And so you see I have that on search right there. So what you can do here is add an event. And so we're going to have a search event. And this is also part of lightweight charts. So here I'm going to have a chart events.search, and we add a search event. And so what this is just a callback function called on search. So anytime a search is made, it's going to call this function with a reference to the chart and the string that was searched for. And so we can implement this function. So after on time frame selection, so we'll have an event for anytime the time frame changes, and event that calls a function whenever there is a new search. So if they search a new symbol, obviously you got to get bar data again for whatever string they search for, and then set the time frame value exactly the same as it was. and then we set the symbol in the top bar. Okay, so I'm gonna run this again, and you'll see it load Taiwan Semiconductor again. If I hit Command F, you'll see it brings up a search box, and then I'm going to type Apple, AAPL. And so when I click enter, it's going to call my callback function on search. It's going to get a reference to the chart so that we can access the top bar and set it to the new string. And it's also going to get this search string. Okay. And so once I get that search string, I'm going to say, oh, take get bar data for Apple, and then since it's already on the 5 minute, it's just going to pass what's already there. So the reason I get this reference to the chart object is so that I can access what the currently selected values are. So it just keeps the time frame the same here. I'm not changing that yet. So I click enter. You see I set the top bar symbol now to Apple, and that's what makes it display there. And then we also get it in the legend, and we get the new Apple data right here, which looks good. All right, so we're making some good progress. Now what is next? Let's add this hotkey ordering. So let's actually place an order when a specific key is pressed. And we can do other interesting things here, like continuously update these bars, request new data, and when some condition is met, in the price action, we might want to place an order. Not doing it on this video, I've done that in a lot of videos. So what I'm gonna do is implement this hotkey functionality. And so if you go here, you see he's added hotkeys, and so you need to dive into the documentation, which is pretty well documented here. And so I've dug through this and documented how to implement this with an actual brokerage account. Most of these examples are just driven by CSV files. So if I click on events here, you see he has a place by order, but all he does is print here. But what I wanted to do is actually make it place an order. And so we're going to specify a hotkey here. You can specify one or more values for that hotkey. So Shift X, he's saying place sell order, and then Shift 1, 2, or 3, he's saying controlling the quantity that he's gonna buy. So I just use Shift O and Shift P. And so in this example here, I'm implementing a hotkey down here. And so if you take these two items here, I'm specifying two chart hotkeys. So I'm going to add this as part of my chart setup. And then you see I have a function that's called. So when you hit Shift and O, it's going to call a function called place order, which I've not defined yet. When you click Shift P, it's going to call place order. So what we need to do is add a place order function. So I got a place order right here, and I'm going to talk you through this bit right here. So this handles when a user clicks a hotkey combination. So I'll put this on my on search right there. Okay. And what are we going to do here? Place order, we're going to capture the key that they pressed. So they press Shift, we know, and we're going to process whether that key is O or P or 1, 2, or 3, and so forth. So when they place the order, what do we need to know? We need to know the symbol so that we can build our contract. So we already talked about building a contract object, and so we're going to dynamically build one based on what's currently being viewed on the chart. So we build our contract, and then we need to build an order object. You see this is underlined. That means I have not imported order yet. And so I'm going to go up here to the top and make sure I import order. And so you see I imported contract. I'm also going to import order right there. And if I go back down, you should see this should be fixed, which is good. Order type is just market here. If we wanted, we can make a box come up and let you specify parameters for a limit order, but I wanted this to be really fast, so I just want to place an order and have it filled. I'm just having a quantity of 1. You could customize this if you would like. Maybe, again, you might want another search box, that a text box where you place some of these settings before you do your hotkeys. The other thing an order object needs is an order ID. And so you'll see I have this place order, and I need a client order ID. And in order to get a new order ID and track the order, we need to call this client.requestIDs here. And that's just part of the API. It'll assign an order ID. And later, when that order is filled, we'll get a callback to the order filled event. And we can check on particular order IDs. Okay. So if the key was O, I'm going to set the action on the order object equal to buy. And if the key is P, I'm setting the action to sell. And then I just call place order, which is part of the IB client. I give it an order ID. I give it a contract. So I'm ordering whatever symbol is specified in this contract. And then I'm specifying this order object. And the reason an order is an object is because I might have another type besides market. Let's say I want a market on close order, market on open order, a stop limit order, and so forth. Okay, so I'm going to place that order. And if I dive in, you can see what place order looks like. You can see there's many different types of orders here, and you can browse through the source code. That's actually quite long. So yeah, let me go ahead and kill that and rerun this and see how it goes. So I'm going to press Shift and O, and I'm going to look at my paper trading account here, and I'm going to Shift and O, and let's see if it places another. You see, I've queued up a lot of these already while testing this. I'm going to see if I can get another buy order to appear above this sell order right here. So I'm going to do Shift and O, and you'll see object has no attribute order ID. So let's see what went wrong. So if I go to my example source code here, you see that we need a callback function here. So when you call request IDs, what it's going to do is the EWrapper class is going to call next valid ID, and it's going to get you a new order ID, but you need to set that here. So self.orderID. So you need to process the callback when I request a new ID here. Okay. So what I'm going to do is add this to my client class right here, and I'll have an order ID. And then you'll see down here where I check the client's order ID. Now I actually have it because that's part of the client object. So I'm requesting the ID, and then I'm going to set it on the client when it's received. And then now I know I actually have it, and I can place the order. So I got to kill that, and I'm going to start it up. Just like that. And I'm going to do Shift O now. And let me show my account again, Shift O, and let's see, next valid ID is 23. You see a buy order went in right there, and I'm going to do another one like that, and you'll see I'm outside of trading hours. It's like 8 p.m. over here, so the market's long been closed, but you see it's queuing up these buy orders, but if the market was open right now, those would immediately fill. So you see I'm using hotkeys in our own little app here to place orders in a different desktop application, and these things are able to communicate. And now I can do Shift P, and I should see a cell appear at the top of this queue here. And there you go, there a cell goes in right there. So that is the hotkey functionality. The next thing I want to do is add the take screenshot button here. And so I have that documented right here. And so you'll see down here in my chart configuration, all I do is add another button. You see our application's getting pretty long now. And so you see I'm adding a chart top bar button. So we have a switcher, we have a button, and we have a watermark. We have a lot of different widgets that we're adding to this application. So I'm going to implement this top bar button, and I'm going to give it a label. So let's go to my chart show here. And at the bottom, I can just put another thing on the top bar. I'm going to add a type button, and I'm going to give it a label of screenshot so that that's what it shows on the screen. And then this also has a callback function. So this says, when I click this button, call this function. So we have on button click, we're calling a function. We have on certain hotkey presses, call a function. And we have on search, we're calling a function. We have a switcher. So we have all these callback functions. So we say, oh, our desktop application, listen for these keyboard events and events from the user. And then when they happen, call some function, trigger some custom code. And so that's a take screenshot function. And you see it's not defined yet. So we need to define that. And so it is simple. I got it right here. Handler for screenshot button. And again, we can put that as another function here. And then so what we want to do is call just chart.screenshot, and that gets us a reference to an image. And so what I did is I wanted to name these files and give them a timestamp. And so you can control, so what I'm doing is opening a new file and writing that image to a file. And we need to decide how to name that file in Python. And so what I'm doing is using an F string here, and I'm saying I just want to get a timestamp so that they have unique names. So if I would have called it just screenshot.ping, every time I take a screenshot, it's going to overwrite the previous one. So I want to make them unique by giving them a unique timestamp. All right, so the next thing I want to do is add something on the right side here. And so I'm going to run this, and you'll see we've had this empty space over here that I reserved for a market scanner. So let's say we want to scan the market for particular stocks or particular stocks that match certain criteria. So let's say top percent gainers or stocks that have a price above $5, things like that. So let's scan the market and display those in a table on the right-hand side. And so there's now a bit of table functionality here. And so if you look, there's a table, and under table here, you see you just need to call create table, and then you can format that table and add new rows programmatically. And so what I'm going to do is implement a scanner subscription in Interactive Brokers. So I'm going to scan, and then when that scan data comes back for each new stock that comes back, we're just going to add a new row, and we're going to just render that on the right side of the screen. And so now if I go over to my example code here on market scanners, you see I'm now importing scanner subscription. So I'm going to add this at the top. So we're going to use the client's scanner subscription. And then if you look in the Trader Workstation API, there's examples of many different types of market scanners. So if I click Python here, you'll see like top percent gain, most active, and so forth. I'm going to use this hot by volume right here. And so I'm going to add that. So I have that code written, hot by volume. And so I have a function called do scan here. And so at the very beginning, when the program starts up, that's when we're going to do our scan. You could add a button to do different types of scans if you want to. I'm just going to call a function called do scan once. So I'm going to put it, let's put it right here, do scan. And then our implementation of do scan. So here's our implementation of do scan, and we'll put that right above here next to take screenshot. Okay, we'll do do scan. You'll see when you call do scan, it's going to create a new scanner subscription. Each type of scan has a scan code. I'm having a input parameter called scan code. So you see when I call do scan, I'm passing in that scan code. For hot by volume, I could easily change that to percent gainers. So if I go back to this function, you'll see a tag value is undefined. And so what we need to do is import this tag value. All those tag values are explained in the Interactive Brokers API documentation. There's a big list of all of them. I won't go through all of them now, but so if I go in the Interactive Brokers source code and type hot by volume here, so I'm going to search this directory, you can probably find a list of them. So there's some sample ones right there, hot by volume, percent gainers. So the same way we had contract samples and order samples that we discussed at the beginning, there's also a lot of samples of all the different types of scanners right here. And there's also a function you can call to request all the different types of scan codes here. And there's a list, somewhere in here where you can list them all out. So I've entered a scan code, hot by volume, and then I can filter on volume as well. And so this list of tag values, that's what that's for. And so what we do is request a scan, pass our scanner subscription object. And then once that comes back, we're going to want to display that scan. So I'm going to say request the scanner data, and then we want to display it. And so I have an implementation called display scan here. And all that does is that's what's going to render that information when it comes back. So display scan right here. I have this function. So one bit of code handles the event where we ask for the scanner. the scan to occur. And then the next function here is what to do with the results. And then we should have one more function here inside of our Interactive Brokers client. This is the EWrapper function called scanner data. So the same way we request historical data and then get that data back and put it in a queue for consumption, we need something to receive the scanner data that we receive back. And so I have an implementation of the scanner data callback, and we're going to add that to the Interactive Brokers client. So if I go back all the way, you see this is the point where you want to start breaking this up into separate files. But I'm just going to keep it in one file for simplicity now. So I implemented scanner data, and you can see I'm just printing out the different contracts that come back. I'm collecting them into a dictionary like we did with historical data, and then I'm putting all that data into a queue. And then on display scan here, you'll see where, once again, I read the queue and then add new rows for each symbol that comes back. So yeah, a little bit of complexity there. I'm not sure how well I explained that, but ultimately you're just creating a scanner subscription object, you're requesting scanner data, you're implementing a callback to process all that scanner data when it comes back. And I'm saying, oh, when I have all the scanner data back, render it on this desktop app here. So if I run this now, you should see, there you go, the results of the scan comes back. It creates a new row for each of those on the table. All right, so the video is probably over an hour long. I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this up. You can tell I'm moving a bit quicker now. So to wrap it up, I wanna just add a couple lines on here. I mentioned the horizontal line functionality here. And so what we wanna do is add a horizontal line to our chart. And so what I'm going to do is go back into our update chart function that displays the bar data. So when we consume that bar data, since we have this data frame here, we can go ahead and add some lines to this chart. So I'm going to add a horizontal line at the high of the data frame. And then I'm also going to add just a simple moving average line. And so to do that, I can just calculate a rolling mean. And so I'm just going to use the 50 period moving average of the close here. And so what I can do is create a new line on the chart using functionality of lightweight charts. I'm going to give it a name, so SMA 50. And then I'm going to set that line equal to some series of data, which is just the date and the close here. And then I'm going to display those lines on the chart. So horizontal line and a 50 MA line. So yeah, horizontal line here. So where we have our chart set for our data frame. So we have our data frame right here in our update chart function that we added earlier. So we have our data frame. Let's go ahead and calculate the high of that data frame, the max high there. And then what we can also do is when that horizontal line is dragged, we can specify a callback function for when I move that horizontal line up and down. And that's why I have an on horizontal line move right there. And I can capture where that line was moved to. And so I'm going to add a little function here for when the horizontal line is moved. And so let me run this one real quick, and let's see if we get that for Taiwan Semiconductor. So if I zoom out here, you should see it add a horizontal line. Where is that high? I think that high occurred back here. Yeah, let me go on the hour time frame. Might be able to see it a little easier. Yeah, there you go. There was that spike to 158 back there. And so we have a horizontal line right there. And then now I can drag that horizontal line down, and we should see our callback function fire. Just like that, horizontal line moved to 148. So that's great. Now let's add, to finish this off, let's go ahead and add a moving average line. So I'm going to add that SMA 50 line. So SMA 50. And so what I'm doing here is I have a list of lines. So we might want to add all kinds of lines to this chart. So you'll see every time we update the chart, I want to clear out our list of lines, because if they switch symbols, we need to clear all the lines off the chart. If they switch timeframes, we need to recalculate all this stuff. And so what I did here at the top, you should see, yeah, I have a list for keeping track of any indicator lines at the top here, and I'm just initializing that as empty. And then on my update chart, I need to be able to access that current lines variable. And so, and I'm going to change it so I can do a global here of current lines. And then in current lines there, in our update chart, I can say for any lines that are currently in that list, if there was anything in there before, we need to clear it out. And then we need to add any new lines that we want to calculate. So I clear indicator lines here. So where's my, my data frame there. So I'm going to clear any indicator lines that are on the chart already, reset current lines to empty, and then I'm going to create a new line and append it and show it on the chart. And so I am going to do this. So create a line on my chart, label it SMA 50, and then set that line equal to a new data frame that's just the date and my close line, and I just set that line to some series of data. So a pandas data frame of just a date and a rolling mean that's calculated on my data frame. And I append that new line to my current lines list right there. And yeah, let's run this and see if we wrap this up. All right. And so there you go. We see a moving average line on there now with a crosshair, and we can see it following the chart around. We should have our horizontal line up there at the top. We have all of our drawing tools here that we can add to our chart. We have our screenshot button. We have our scanner. We can switch when we click a row, which I didn't mention. We have a new row function here. So I have an on row click function right here. So when you click a row, it changes the symbol in our top bar, and we fetch the bar data for whatever's clicked. So that's one of the little point I didn't make. So click LW here. You see it switches the chart to LW, fetches new data, and puts that label up here. And so yeah, we covered a lot of different bits of functionality in this tutorial and many different programming concepts. And over time, I'll probably add some follow-up video to elaborate on these a bit more. I originally had this written as like a 7-part series or something, but then I was taking so long to write it that I had never put anything out. So I'm trying not to overthink everything and just get it out there and share the source code. Yeah, so that's it for this video. I'll be making a lot more of these. So see you in the next one. Bye.